Hi, thanks everyone for coming. For those who don't know me, I'm Adria Adi, one of the music faculty here. And I'm very excited to introduce you all to Daniel Riera, who is our guest speaker today in our Careers in Music and Technology lecture series. This is the second event that we've had this semester. We usually aim to have 2 guest speakers per semester, so keep an eye out for future guest speakers next fall. And then for all of our previous guest speakers, or most of them, you should, if you missed any of our previous speakers, you check the CSM DigMe, that's DGME, YouTube channel, where we archive a lot of our previous guest talks. So Daniel, I'll just give a super quick intro. Daniel is a multi-instrumentalist, producer, composer from San Francisco. I think his training is in jazz and Afro-Latin musical traditions. As a musician, even though he's a multi-instrumentalist, I think of Daniel a lot as a wind player because he incorporates a lot of really interesting wind controllers, which I think he's going to demonstrate for you all today. So yeah, and he has a really cool modular synth setup up here, as well as kind of loop setup. So he's going to demonstrate that in a little bit after he talks about his path in music. So without further ado, please welcome Daniel Riera.
Today. I've known Adria for a long time and also a very cool, inspiring synthesist and sound explorer, and so honored to be asked to be in this. And I think first off, I'm just going to play for you a little bit so you can hear what I do, and then I'll go into kind of my background and explaining the more technical aspects of it and my goals and everything. But I guess to start with, I just want to say that all the music I do is fully improvised, so I don't know what I'm gonna necessarily play when I start playing. It just, I kind of just like to see what happens, and there's elements of randomness that I bring in with this modular synth, and yeah, we just kind of see where things go. So let's try this. I'm gonna show you how I build up a track from just one note. Thank you, thank you. So, my life and career in music. So I'm going to talk about, I guess, my musical background, how I got to this point of performing this way, and some of my influences, and some of the steps along the way. So let's see. My musical training began, like many, in the church, singing in the church choir, And I feel like that set me up really well for my music because I learned things like harmonies, chords, major scales and triads, and we would sing warm-ups like la 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 la. So from a very young age, I intuitively understood about harmony and how to harmonize a melody or to find those notes. Even before I knew what I was doing, but I was using music theory already, just kind of absorbing it. And Catholic church music is actually the basis of all Western music. The notation systems that we use and the harmonic language all comes from that. So yeah, I felt like I was set up pretty well by that experience. Also performing in front of people and getting over stage fright. Let's see. Hip hop. So as I got a little bit older and started developing my music tastes, I fell in love with hip hop, and this was the late 90s, so Dr. Dre, Snoop, Tupac was really big, and I loved rap, but actually what I realized later is I loved the music that they were sampling in the rap. So that was kind of my introduction to funk and jazz, and one of the coolest things about sampling, in my opinion, is kind of the door is open for anything. And you can open up this whole world of recorded music without prejudice and say, I want something from this in my music, and it could be a totally unrelated genre that has nothing to do with it. And that almost makes it cooler to me, is when people flip something in a way that nobody could have intended. So yeah, and as well as sampling, I was getting into looped music and kind of the hypnotic effect of that. Kind of shortly after that, I started using a DAW myself. Actually, the first one I used was not a digital audio workstation, it was just a digital MIDI workstation, because at that time, having full-length audio tracks in a computer wasn't really a thing yet. You might be able to have short samples, but the memory just wasn't there yet. So it was mostly MIDI sequencing. And I was inspired by game music too. My favorite game soundtracks, you could usually find general MIDI files of those. And I would open them up and look at them and say wow, what makes this music so great, and try to understand it, throw it in my sequencer, which was Cakewalk, and remix it or just put different sounds with it. And just playing around with MIDI, I had a great time, and I think I really developed my ears with that too. I started making my own MIDI files of songs that I like, because at that time, ringtones were still in general MIDI format. So if you wanted a cool song on your phone, it had to be a MIDI file. Okay, Latin Jazz Youth Ensemble. This is another big thing in my musical history. So this is a group that I was part of in starting my freshman year of high school. And we learned Afro-Cuban music. It was led by the great teacher there in the middle, John Calloway. And he is one of my mentors to this day. I still call him for things. And I now am the teacher of this ensemble. After 25 years, he was ready to retire. So I took it over, and I'm working with the new generation, teaching them Afro-Cuban music. And that's very much in my cultural background, but also that being in this ensemble really reinforced it. Things like clave and the way that you phrase in this West African derived music. It's a whole other kind of language. And yeah, loops are much more important in that music too, and rhythmic cells. And also this idea that the timekeeping is not just belonging to the one drum set player, but to a whole ensemble. So that leads to some really interesting pockets. If you have someone that's a little bit rushing, someone that's a little bit dragging, and they're playing together, it kind of creates a more unique rhythmic feel, which brings me to my next, oh, actually not quite yet. Oh, okay, so my first analog synth was a Korg MS-20. And it wasn't actually mine. It belonged to one of my best friends. He went to LaGuardia High School in New York, and one day they decided to throw out their whole synth lab, which was full of MS-20s and also Wurlitzer electric pianos. So he was like, what the hell? And then he like literally dug them out of a dumpster. And so I got my hands on that, and I was immediately like in love with it. First of all, like hearing an analog synthesizer and all the finesse and subtleties that's in there. I mean, I was already digging synth sounds, like techno and acid house and stuff was really popular at that time. So there was like a lot of like synth riffs in the popular music sphere. And I was like, wow, I want to be able to make those type of sounds. So I was immediately drawn to the MS-20. And then also, if you notice on the right side, it's got those patch points there. So it's a semi-modular synth, meaning you could rearrange the order of the circuits in there to create combinations that maybe the original designers didn't necessarily envision, but they gave you the ability to use it in other ways. So I would experiment and find all kinds of ways to break it or to do unconventional things. Like I would run my flute into it with the mic. There's like a comparator, so you can turn your mic input into like a square wave. So yeah, after playing with that, I knew, okay, I'm really into analog synths, and I want to get one for myself and keep exploring that. Let's see, Jay Dilla. So Jay Dilla is a huge influence on my music as well. I don't know how familiar you all are with him, but he's a hip hop producer who worked with many people from like, he was famous with this group Slum Village, but he's produced for Talib Kweli and Janet Jackson, and anyway, so he kind of, Dilla's music was unique because he turned off quantization. So does anyone not know what quantization is? Okay, so quantization, in these digital sequencers, it's very easy to make things perfect. You can press a button, and if you played something in sloppy, it will line it up onto the beat for you and make it perfect. And so that was revolutionary when it came out, because it brought a new level of precision to music, and like techno and electronic music is all based around that, like having that really straight rhythm. So Jay Dilla was maybe not the first, but the one who I popularized, to me, this concept like, well, actually we don't have to quantize. We can use electronic instruments, but we can still let the human imperfection shine through in that. Not just imperfection, but very artfully played time and rhythms that are not straight on the grid. There's like a push-pull factor. Maybe I'll just give a quick explanation of what that kind of sounds like. So, so here's a drum loop. It's pretty much straight on the beat. This is like how a drummer would play it. But I'm going to show you what happens when you desynchronize it. It almost sounds like a swing, like he's delaying, this drummer is delaying the notes. And if we keep going down lower, it's going to eventually turn into like a triplet figure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I go even lower, Now all those extra little ghost notes are getting cut off. So you just hear the quarter notes. So I was much more interested in these rhythms that are in the cracks, not the ones that are straight on the beat, but now if we go higher, you start to hear the drum loop runs out. There's like a silent, there's gaps in it. Now, I will say this is not how Jay Dilla did his drums. This is a way that I've figured out to kind of get me in that ballpark, but a lot easier. So I believe Jay Dilla played the drums on the pads of the MPC, but I wanted something that was like a lot simpler to do live, and also use a sequencer. So it's re-triggering that loop every quarter note. So it's still staying on beat, but then the slices can be off beat within that, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so here's the first video I ever posted on YouTube, and it's still my top video. It's on like 500,000 plays now, and it recently Kanye West on his new album has a song that has a sample, not of mine, but it sounds like it. I think maybe they did a sound-alike or a replacement or something to avoid using it. But yeah. So this is beginning to use technology with my music. So the TalkBox is a way of doing like a robot voice type of vocal. This is in my dorm room at Berkeley when I was a freshman in college. Yeah.
Why do birds suddenly appear every time that you're here? Just like me, they want to win.
I'm just going to play a minute of that. But yeah, and that was like my first experience too with like kind of virality, and I got totally scared. Like I never posted anything else on YouTube for like 10 years after that. Okay, here's my setup in 2007. So I had my laptop, my early MacBook. I had my same speakers that I still use today that I've had from the very beginning. My Mackie monitors, which I love, and they may not be the best speakers in the world, but I know how they sound, and so I trust them very much. And then just a MIDI keyboard, a turntable for sampling, and Reason. Does anyone work with Reason?
I've tried it before.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know how to use it, but I'm a GarageBand guy.
Okay, awesome, yeah. Yeah, Reason is an interesting one because it's very much based around this idea of virtual hardware. Like, you look at these virtual racks, and it was kind of limiting because in most DAWs, like if you want to expand something, it can take up the whole screen if you want. But in Reason, they were very locked into this like image of looking at a rack with tiny controls. But anyway, I learned how to get the most out of it. Let's see, okay. So when I was at Berkeley, I did the music synthesis major, which now no longer exists. Now it's called electronic production and design. And it's a lot more like comprehensive, I guess, but at that time the focus was really on synths. So I went to Berkeley from '05 to '09. And so that's where I got my hands on real modular synths, like a Moog modular system, ARP 2600. They had a CMS modular synth, which is based on an ARP, but like more tricked out. And we did things in class like patch diagrams, like tracing the flow of a synth patch. I learned about digital signal processing and how plugins and are created, things like reverb algorithms, like tube simulating algorithms. And we worked a lot with C sound, which is based on the C programming language, but specifically for sound. And I thought it was cool. Like, you can really do anything you can envision, but at the same time, it's like building a ship in a bottle. Like, when you're making music with code, it's like you write it and then you hit commit and see like, okay, did I get it right? Okay, no, do it again. So already then I was thinking, I need something that's a lot more immediate and like real time. And that's what appealed to me about the analog synths. At that time, it was just vintage ones, and the focus of the department was more on the computer side. I think now at Berkeley, they've gone back to pushing analog synths. Kind of just the landscape has changed, and there's been a huge resurgence of analog modular synths, control voltages. Yeah. That's one of my professors, Michael Berillio at Berkeley. Okay, so post-college, I kind of stepping out into the world, wanting to do performances, and I started to think about like what are my goals? And the first goal was replacing a DJ. So, DJs are cool, I love them, but I always thought the main problem was it's fixed. Like, you're playing other people's music, or you're playing music that was already created, so there's no reaction, there's no improvisation there. And coming from my background in jazz, I really wanted to bring that element into music, but I wanted to also be able to play by myself, play music that sounds like electronic music and has that bass that moves people, shakes asses, So yeah, my goal was to replace a DJ with something live that uses improvisation, that brought these concepts from Jay Dilla about rhythm into it. And I knew I wanted to have cool harmonies. I wanted to use analog synths. So here's my setup in, I think, like 2010. So I started to add a little bit more hardware, had a few analog synths. I got my Rhodes piano, which has been like a major part of my sound ever since then. I use it on everything I do practically. I even have samples of it in here in my modular synth. So yeah, I set out to basically achieve this goal, and it's been taking me like over a decade to kind of live up to these ideals that I set forth then. Okay, so here's me doing a looping performance in 2015. Now at this time, I was still using a laptop for everything. So I have my laptop, and I have my EWI 4000S, which is this one. This is my wind controller, and this is the first one I got. This is actually my latest one that came out in 2020, although this morning it stopped working. I was really excited to show it to you, but you know how devices get when there's pressure. So I brought that just to show and tell. But so okay, here's me doing looping with the EWI and the laptop, and I also was. So on this controller, you can play notes, and then there's also keys which can send control change messages, MIDI control, and I use those to activate the looper controls, like when to start and stop, and also to clear a loop. Okay, so I just set the first loop. Now I'm changing it to a different sound. I have this little mixer controller. I had all my sounds, and I still do. I have them so that they can all be layered together if you want. Okay, so yeah, that like pad is played with a harmonizer. So I play one MIDI note, and it generates a chord out of that. Like a sample voice patch that I'm playing now. Okay, I'm doing drums. I forgot I had the reverb on, so that's why it sounds like a bomb going on. These are like the little mistakes, but then you just flow with it. Now I'm playing drums on it. I'm just gonna skip forward. Okay, here I'm transitioning to something else. I'm like, I don't know where to go. This groove has kind of played out its time, so now I have to find the next thing. Some trippy effects are always good when you're in that like transitional stage. So at this time, I was teaching beat making after school classes to youth. So this was a demo we did for that school, and the guys around me are some of the other teachers from that program. It's called Today's Future Sound. Now I'm playing a bass line. Okay, so you guys get the idea. So I felt like that was pretty cool, but I wanted to like be able to move faster. Like it still was taking me a long time to get an idea going, maybe like 2 minutes to build up the layers, and I felt like that was too long. I needed to be able to make more faster changes. And also I just wasn't happy with the tones of what I was getting. I know computers can sound spectacular, amazing, but when it comes to live, like if you use those like really juicy plugins that use up all your memory, like then it's going to crash. So I would have to like drastically scale back down. Also, this was 10 years ago. Computers were different. But so I was just trying to have it like stability be the main thing and not use sounds that would bog down my computer too much. But eventually that led me into moving away from computers completely. So now when I perform, it's all hardware. So I have a hardware looper. I have my modular synth case. I have my Wind controller. And I don't use a computer. This is just for the slides today. I guess I should do another little demo. Okay, so this time I'll try starting it from my sample players that I have in here. So yeah, one of the things so at that time everything was coming from the iwi. Like if I didn't play it, you weren't gonna hear it. So I thought maybe I need to have something else in addition to the wind controller that's making sound that I can feed off of. So that's when I started bringing in the drum loops and other things. So here's a drum loop. I have my filters. And then I have another sampler that's playing back chords. And I can transpose them. So this is running off a sequencer, analog step sequencer, and it has eight steps, and I'm using 4 steps for the drums and 4 steps for the samples. So I'm just going to put everything on the first step so you just hear what that sounds like. This is just a pattern where every note is the same. So now I'll add some variations to it. I don't like the groove of it, so I'm going to transpose the drum slightly and we'll find a different place. Okay, then I bring in the sample, the chord sample. It's just holding that one chord because I still have the pattern is all 0, so now I'm going to add some variation to it. Okay, and then I can filter these chords down. And then I can add an LFO to it. It's a little too much. I just want a little shimmer. I don't want it to be too overpowering, you know? I'm just explaining like the decisions that are going through my head on a very fast pace when I'm performing. Okay, so once I have a loop going that I kind of like the vibe of, then I'll start improvising on it. I'll do a bass line. I had this idea down, and it's starting to get stale, so now I want to move on to the next thing. So I'll start by taking out something. Maybe I'll take out the chords. I can have a button that I'll press to move to the next drum sample. I don't know what it's gonna be, it's random. So I just press this, but it'll still stay in sync. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let me try changing the pitch of this. Okay, let's go with the triplet feel. Now I'll bring in back those chords, and the space line's kind of not working anymore with the triplet feel, so I'll stop that. Then I'll bring back the chords. Last thing is you got to end gracefully. Thank you. So let's talk about my career in music. So here's my studio, what it looks like today. A lot of the same gear that I've had for years, the same monitors, same synths and Rhodes that I've had, and I've just collected stuff over the years. I got my acoustic treatment a lot better. That's really important, and I probably would have invested in that first if I knew what I knew today. So what does my career in music look like? So the things that I've been focused on lately are recording, record producing. Like I started with my own music, started just making beats, and then eventually I wanted to record bands, record live drums and a full band all at once. So I've been buying gear and like practicing my skills to be able to do that. I have some videos to show you later of my work in that realm. I've been doing work in podcasts. Got to do some very cool original music scores for podcasts, and that really uses all of my skills from the engineering side to the sound design to composing music. Let's see, songwriting and producing. So that's like working with artists and songwriters, rappers, singers, and helping bring their songs to life. So I bring my production skills, my composition skills, and my people skills, I think, to that work. Performances, so that could be gigging, playing concerts, or it could be something like this, where I'm talking to you here today. I've done a lot of shows with a band, and also using the wind controller with a band, and also performing solo. And I was reflecting actually recently that I've gotten way better gigs playing solo than I have with the band, which is sad because playing with the band is more fun for me and it's more freedom. But when you play with a band, you got to split that money 4, 5, 6 ways. So I've gotten a lot more prestigious gigs playing solo too. Like I played at the Fillmore, the Independent, played at the Rickshaw Stop. So like And yeah, just jumping into that role of a DJ. Sometimes I don't even tell people that I'm not a DJ, or like they don't, I don't know. But I just show up and do my thing, and kind of fills that niche. Teaching is a big one. So I teach, honestly, like the money I get from teaching is not as lucrative as other things I do, but it's the giving back factor that I really like, and the mentorship. Like, so now I'm teaching that Latin Jazz Youth Ensemble that I showed you earlier, and that's been one of the most rewarding things for me, is like watching the students grow and become beast musicians, some of them, and also getting to use my traditional like notation and arranging chops, like writing music for them. Grants is a big one. So when it comes to the amount of money you get for the amount of labor required, grants is the absolute best thing, because I've gotten some like $20,000 and $30,000 grants from the city of San Francisco to do my art. You just have to be really good at writing. It's about maybe 10, 12 pages of writing about yourself and why your music or why your art is like valuable and important. And, you know, so I've been working on that for several years now. Happy to have gotten, I think, like 4 or 5 grants that have sustained me and allowed me to keep doing this stuff. It's great that there are institutions out there that recognize the importance of the arts and are willing to put up cash for it to allow like these really niche, obscure things that I'm into to be explored. And last is a day job. So I wish I could come up here and say I make all my money from music, but I don't. I also work for Pandora, the music streaming company, and actually that's where I met Adria. So yes, I'm a techie by day and weirdo musician by night.
Because it is kind of niche at your day job.
So so we worked on, well, I still work on, but the Music Genome Project, which is Pandora's proprietary way of sorting music. It's basically like meta tagging a song with like 300 to 600 tags per song. It's very detailed. And that's how the algorithm sorts music, by these musicological features. So yeah, that's been good practice for me too, just to listen to music every day for hours, learn about different genres and stay fresh. Did you have a question?
Yeah, if you're able to share, what are some of like the tags that you would use to label the song? Is it like emotional or like genre-based?
Well, I can't be too specific because it's proprietary, but I will say like moods are some of the tags. There's like, I think 12 different moods that we capture, from like low energy, high energy, dramatic, scary, romantic, sexual. And then there's aspects of the music, like what instruments are there, what voices and what types of voices, what are their ranges, what's the harmonic structure of the music like, what does, like the tempo, is it a live recording or is it in the studio, things like that. Is it offensive? That's a really big one that we have to stay on top of. Okay, let me talk about some of my DIY projects, because I wouldn't be able to do this the way I'm doing if I had not done a lot of tinkering and inventing, so to speak. So, okay, when I started using MIDI controllers with analog synths, I soon ran into a problem, and that is called zippering. Does anyone know what zippering is? Not quite. So I have on my Wind controller here at the top, this like rubber nipple thing. That's a breath sensor, and so that controls how loud the sound is going to be. So I'm doing that all with my breath. You'll hear it's controlling not just the volume, but also a filter is opening. So yeah, the wind controller is all based around that breath controller. That's the most important one. And when you blow, so like let's say this is my pressure of blowing, right? When I would control these MIDI instruments, I would notice that instead of being a straight line like I wanted, it actually was a stepped line like this. That's because MIDI, which came out in 1983, I think, or 4? 4, or okay.
I think it's 3.
It's an 8-bit protocol. So that is very ancient and band limited by today's standards. So when I blow in there, instead of being smooth like this, it said, okay, here you're at one step, and then you jump to the next step, and then you jump to the next step. So instead of being able to do a smooth sweep like you just heard, when you blow that filter, it sounds like you're opening a zipper, like grrrr. So that's why it's called zippering. And I was thinking about, well, in this instrument, there is an analog breath sensor that's being converted into a digital signal for MIDI. If I play a MIDI synth or a soft synth, most of them have some type of smoothing that goes on. So this stair step will become, it'll get filtered, but you won't get that resolution back, actually. It's like if you took a picture and made it pixely, and then you made it blurred, it's still, I mean, you don't see the pixels anymore, but it's still blurry. It's still not an accurate representation of what I'm trying to do. So I figured, okay, the only way I can get around this is not to use MIDI, but to use an analog control voltage. And these analog synths usually they have modulation points where you can inject an analog voltage in there to control some parameters. So what I ended up doing is I found out where the breath sensor was on my iwi, and I soldered these little extra wires to it to like tap into that signal. And then I sacrificed the headphone jack on this, and I turned that into a control voltage out jack. And then I have this little fancy cable with three doohickeys on it. One is for MIDI, one is for just the breath control, and one is for, this brings power to my iwi, so I don't have to worry about batteries. And then I created, so this is my little circuit diagram where I was figuring out what I would need to get that analog voltage from my breath controller, and I had to scale it up and amplify it in order to be 0 to 10 volts, which is what my modular synth wants. So there's my little circuit design, and then there's the module that I built, which I'm using today. I intended to show you just this as like a progress thing, but I had to go back to my old controller today because my new one wasn't working. So I'm actually using this today. So the analog breath signal flows into that top jack, and then the other ones are, what the iwi puts out is 0 to 3 volts, and it's inverted. So it's 3 volts when you're not blowing and 0 when you are blowing. So I wanted to flip that so it was 0 volts when you're not blowing and 10 volts when you are blowing max. So that's what this circuit does. It's a scaling circuit. So this drives the whole modular synth. And it has multiple outputs, so I can use that breath voltage in many different places. So this was one of the first DIY electronics projects I ever did. Here's one of my other, you can see how janky my wiring is. I can't use this anymore because there's just like too many bad solder points in there, and like it's kind of works, but then sometimes it doesn't. So I have to go through it and totally like clean it up and redo it. But this is a dual filter, an analog filter based on the SEM Oberheim designs. And this is one that was recommended for wind synth players and has been used for that. And then having two filters was important to me. So there's actually two of those boards stacked on top of each other and a panel that has like normalized controls for both, so that one signal can feed into both filters, one control signal can like open and close both filters. And with two filters, you can get some cool formant effects. It's not like more vocal, kind of squawking type of sounds. Let's see, what else have I got? Oh, okay, so this is radio music. So this is something that I didn't design it, but it's a kit. It comes as a kit, and it's a sample player. So it uses these micro SD cards, and they load right into the front, and then it's very simple controls. So what's called station controls which sample is selected, and then the knob that says start controls what the pitch is, and then it's able to be sequenced from my analog sequencer. So that's how I have two of these radio music modules. One is for the chords and one is for the drums. And so in the computer, I've gone through and done all the sample chopping ahead of time. First, I made sure that everything was at the same BPM. That way, so when I'm performing, I can just go to the next sample, and it'll still be roughly in sync with where I was. And then, yeah, so the drums are like break beats that are 1 bar long, but then they're chopped into 4 chunks. So I chop on each quarter note, which is really a big chunk, but that allows me to keep more of the human feel that the drummer originally played in with that. Yeah, so this is like a very primitive and arcane way of working with samples. You know, a lot of people are used to like MPCs or something where you can just recall them and they're perfectly in sync, or Ableton, you know. But I like this like very primitive method because it's more unpredictable. And it's very hands-on. I won't get bogged down in too many options. You know, there's not that many controls. And also just the sound quality of these samplers has like a really grittiness. Let me see if I can show this. Can you hear that? Hear that fuzz on the top? So this is a sound that's just made of pure sine waves. So it shouldn't have that grit there, but it does. It's like almost like a low bit rate type of sound. And if I turn the pitch down, it'll get even more pronounced. So it's kind of reminiscent of those 90s samplers that are very sought after among certain type of producers that like the lo-fi thing. So then, okay, so I'll show you like how, I'm just going to sweep through the different samples that are in this bank. Oops. 5 chords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I tried to pick chords that had a common tone in the top note. That reminds me of like Robert Glasper. Do you guys know Robert Glasper? He's a jazz musician, like a very hip-hop influenced jazz musician. And he does stuff like this with the keys. Okay, let me go to the next bank. So here's some, is this the piano? Oh yeah, this is my Rhodes. So then once I start the sequencer, I'm like, why is it not changing? Oh, because I unplugged something. Okay, now I just plugged in the control voltage, so now it's going to... Something I can do too is I can change the rate of the sequencer. That's probably too fast, so... Or I could make it be... So right now the pulses are changing on every quarter note, but I could have it be syncopated. If I press the bank change, I'm going to get another bank that is random. So this is a sample of like an old record that had a lot of lush strings and stuff. So the reason why I wanted chords and drums is because those are the two things that are hard to do with this. You know, it's like mainly a monophonic instrument. So I wanted to have with those two elements, I can get something going really fast and also do a really rapid change. I can do a full change like this quickly. 3, 4. Now we're in a totally different territory. You know, samplers aren't that commonly used actually in modular synths because usually the focus is on synthesizing, but I just liked having that there for live performances. Also, like, this case is pretty small. You know, some people that perform with Eurorack have like 2 or 3 cases or huge things, you know, so one of my criteria also was that I had to be able to just like carry it easily on a plane, like carry on. Yeah, so let's see, those are my samplers. So this is a video I made a few years ago that was explaining how I approach
electronic sounds,
trying to do
the sweet spot,
emulate acoustic instruments using the synths.
And organic realism, where the listener has no idea how the sound was made. I think of this as the so-called
one of the reasons I like
valley.
analog synths so much is I think they can actually sound more acoustic than
acoustic momodeling.
Than a digital
using analog synthesizers.
Can. Like there's
all
that resolution is there, all those nice harmonics.
To do modeling
no aliasing.
Acoustic instruments. The goal is not to sound exactly like an acoustic instrument, but to evoke the qualities.
So this is a sound that's supposed to be like a
still
sax.
a huge amount of uncharted sonic territory to explore using vintage analog synthesizer technology from the 70s. Through my research, I became interested in an obscure German wind synth from 1975 called the Variophone, which is a predecessor of the EWI that I play. The interesting part to me about the Variophone was that it used fixed-width pulse waves to approximate the pressure pulses generated by double reed instruments. This technique gives a unique spectra with gaps, something similar to a formant filter. This is a waveform you can't get from a standard analog oscillator without some clever patching. When I read that someone else had taken interest in this technique and was selling Eurorack module kits, I knew I had to try them out. Rico was kind enough to send me a few of his kits to try out. The blip comes as a PCB panel set, so I sourced my own parts online and got to building. All the documentation is on the Fricko website. The build was easy and took me about 3 hours to complete. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of installing a couple of 1K resistors instead of 1 meg-ohm due to the product being mislabeled. A good lesson to always check part
Aish. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead.
dependent of frequency, as set by the width knob. Then we've got the bass knob on the blip.
I'm just gonna give you guys a TLDR, which is, who knows what a pulse wave is, or a square wave? Right, it's one of the basic oscillators used in an analog synthesizer. And so like a square wave looks like this. And the main thing is that it's proportional. So this section is equivalent in length to this section, like that. And then a pulse wave would be like where you have a blip and then you have a longer blip. So they're more spaced out. And this is going to sound more full and hollow, and this is going to sound more thinner and reedy. And then, so what I'm doing with the kind of like the analog acoustic type is, so in a reed instrument like a saxophone, when that reed is flicking against the mouthpiece as you blow, and you can be, the waveform that produces is actually really similar to a pulse wave. But the main difference is, in a pulse, on a synth, when you go higher, if you play a higher note, that pulse is going to be proportional. So like, let's say this is like 15% of the duty cycle. When you play a higher note, it's still going to be 15%. It's going to be smaller, but it's going to be proportional. Whereas on a reed instrument, if you go higher or lower, those pulses of the reed slapping the mouthpiece remain the same length, but they're just more spaced out or closer together. So it's not proportional to the pitch. It's actually decoupled from that. So what that would sound like is like on a saxophone, if you play the lowest note, it's actually going to sound kind of thinner. It's not going to be as rich as maybe a note that's in the mid-range. And then, so yeah, that's one of the concepts that I was working with. Basically using analog synthesis as physical modeling, basically, like representing parts of an acoustic instrument with these analog modules. So my pulse oscillator is like the reed and mouthpiece, and then a filter is like the body resonance, an analog filter. And then I use a wave folder, which is kind of like a distortion, and that models what's happening on a saxophone when you play loud. The body is like responding in a complex way to that reed and creating other harmonics and resonances with it. So, okay, I don't have it quite as dialed in. That sax patch is like something that is very finicky. Like I have to dial the knobs just so, or the illusion is broken. But let me try. I see what it's sounding like right now. I'm probably not going to find an amazing sound right now, but this is just showing you like the range of colors that are in there. Herbie Hancock, who knows him? Okay, so he's someone who's like at the intersection of jazz and technology for his whole career. He's still alive, like one of probably the last living jazz giants. Okay, I'll just play 5 seconds of this, but this is something he did with modular synths back in the early 70s. So it starts off like real abstract like that, and then the band comes in. Anyway, I'll just keep it going. Roger Troutman of Zapp and Roger fame.
The voice box.
Sampled by Tupac.
The first time I ever heard it, you were doing
it. You know that California
love.
love. So that's where he was the one that got me interested in talk boxes.
I had heard it with Peter Frampton and a couple other artists, and I would use it before we had hit records, playing in nightclubs, doing cover songs. And every time I would use the voice box, people would be dancing until I used it, and when I started using it, they would look up and they would seem to hypnotize them in a way.
Yeah.
And it really works. Watch this.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Video Soul, and it makes you feel good. Yes, it does. Don't you believe?
I'm sad I didn't bring that today, but I was just trying to keep it somewhat simple. It requires like a whole different setup. Bernie Worrell, do you guys know like Parliament Funkadelic and stuff? So when I think of like a fat analog sound, that's who I'm trying to channel. Like. So kind of like that hip-hop way of using synths is like a big influence on me, and that comes from Bernie Worrell and being sampled by all the hip-hoppers. Mark Rebillet, I know you guys know him. Yeah, so when he came out, it made me so mad because I was like, I've been working on like looping for like 10 years already, and this guy's like perfected it. But I've learned a lot from watching him too, and I love his style and just the humor that he brings to it, the playfulness. It's like he's doing something so cool technically, but that's not even the most important thing. Like it's just like the vibe that he brings. So that helps keep me in check when I'm like thinking people should care about what I'm doing because I put so much effort and thought into it. But no, it's like really, at the end of the day, you still got to be a showman and a performer. Oh yeah, so this is the one, the iwi that I'm playing today. That's my new one. What is, let's see, I'm talking about the loopers. Man, I really didn't pace this well. Okay, let me just, last thing, I'm going to talk about some ways I have of doing polyphonic stuff with the iwi. So the first way is called legato sustain. So that means when I play a phrase and I do it on one breath, I'm not tonguing each note. So the first note that I play is going to get held out. So it sounds like this. So you can use it, I think they were intending you to use it for drones. But I also figured out how I can make it sound like I'm doing double stops, like. You just got to play a note really fast and almost imperceptibly for it to latch on and then move to the next one. So I'm doing like ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. You can make them almost sound like it's simultaneous. Then there's various ways I've worked out with the. So this is like a harmonizing in parallel fourths. And then if you add the slur sustain to that, we get this. Kind of sounds like a shun, you know, that mouth organ. And then there's a way I have of doing full chords. So you can move them in parallel, so it's just the same chord that's getting transposed by my fingerings. And then I figured out, oh, I can have those different notes of that chord respond to the pitch bend differently. So I use my pitch bend to select a different chord. So it sounds like this. So this is one of the main synth modules I use for the iwi, just because with the sliders, it's really easy to change things on the fly. And this can get into some FM kind of clangorous territory as well. Okay, so that's my two sampler modules, and that's the filter that I use as a mixer. So when I'm bringing them in and out, I'm using the filter to mix them. Oh yeah, so here's what those drum loops look like chopped up. It's the same drum loop chopped on the quarter note at different speeds. So you can see how the hits line up to the grid in a different place depending on the speed. Including like when I speed it up, like these gaps appear. This is a module from Reason, that old program. That was the inspiration for what I'm doing with the hardware samplers, but like the chopped upness. If you want to see how I use quickly just how I use the wind controller with a live band. So this was this, Soltron was like kind of this Latin pop dance group that I was in. And I wrote this song. All right, yeah, I'm just gonna end it there. Yeah, questions?
Question from Michael.
The pitch bend on the iwi, is that, so that's a continuous controller, but it's not kind of quantized into MIDI?
So yeah, the pitch bend is a MIDI continuous controller, and that gets combined with my fingering note into one pitch voltage that gets sent to the synth. So that it's all packed together. That and also the glide, like portamento, is another control that I have. So all those affect the pitch. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Thank you. And the MIDI pitch bend is actually a higher resolution than most MIDI controls because it uses 128 steps for up and 128 steps for down. So that's like double the bandwidth of some of the other MIDI controllers.
So when you do the wind controller live in the video,
Yeah.
you have to connect to a speaker.
Yeah, I will connect to a speaker audio system of some kind, PA system. Yeah.
I see.
So where did you learn how to do all the tinkering stuff? Because that's, did you just look it up on the internet or just experience?
Yeah, I'm mainly self-taught. I used to hang out a lot on this forum called Mod Wiggler that's for modular synths. And that's where I learned a lot of this stuff. There's very knowledgeable people to talk to. Also, my father-in-law is an electrical engineer by trade. So I've taken some projects to him before where I was like, why is this not working? And his background is in like telephonics. So it's sort of related to audio. So he was able to figure out stuff for me. Yeah.
Just about the career choices that you're making. Have you had like, people from the industries approach you, with your compositions or like how, I'm just kind of wondering how you ended up in where you are, like with Pandora and, what the choices were or is.
Well, how I ended up at Pandora definitely had to do with, and this was a slide that I had for later, but like my takeaways. And I think one of my biggest takeaways was learning music theory and harmony has been instrumental in every step of my career. Like, you would think I'm doing something like non-traditional, but I still use all those skills. Like, when I'm setting up a harmonizer or thinking of cool ways to do polyphony and stuff, I'm putting that theory stuff to work. And when I got hired at Pandora, also that music theory background was one of the deciding factors for them, I think, for me to like analyze and understand music. Yeah, if you guys have the opportunity to take classes on that here, like if you're any kind of music major, I think it's valuable,
That looks like a clarinet we use. Do you play clarinet?
I never played clarinet. I played saxophone, and flute is my main instrument.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, if you have questions, feel free to come on up. But
thank you.